All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the historic and honestly intensely debated August 2026 Lollapalooza mainstage performance by Blackpink's Jennie. It's just such a fascinating case study of what actually happens when a massive global superstar steps out entirely on her own, right in front of one of the world's most demanding festival crowds. We're going to look closely at the data, the media critiques, and the on-the-ground fan reports to figure out exactly what went down in Chicago.
So let's dive right into it. Just consider this incredibly jarring contrast. On one hand, you have a major professional music critic brushing the set off as a grand karaoke. But then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you've got these dedicated fans insisting that standing for hours in the freezing rain and mud was completely worth it. I mean, it is super rare to see such a polarized reaction to a single 60-minute set. How on earth did one performance spark such extremely opposite takes? Let's break down the facts.
Section 1. Historic Lollapalooza headliner. We'll start with the undeniable facts of August 1st, 2026, at Chicago's Grant Park.
What you really need to take away from this is the sheer weight of the moment. Jennie achieved a monumental milestone here. She became the very first Korean female solo artist to close out the iconic Bud Light stage. And to put that into perspective, this is a platform previously graced by absolute industry legends like Coldplay, The Cure, and The Weeknd. So the expectations going into a headlining slot of this magnitude are astronomically high. You aren't just an act on the bill, you are literally the reason hundreds of thousands of people are there.
Section 2. 60 minutes, 18 live songs. To understand the true scale of her task, we have to look at the stamina required for this.
18. Think about that for a second. That is a massive number for a solo artist who's used to splitting the heavy lifting 4 ways in a group. She had to carry that giant crowd for a full 60 minutes, delivering 18 songs backed by a live band. That requires an absolutely incredible amount of vocal and physical endurance.
And this chart right here brilliantly illustrates the pressure of being a main stage closer. Compare her to fellow K-pop act Cortas, who also played the festival. They had a highly praised, solid 11-song set over 40 minutes on the T-Mobile stage. But Jennie, she had to stretch her set to 60 minutes and 18 songs on the main stage, pushing her to debut multiple completely unreleased tracks just to fill the time. The pressure on a headliner is just in a totally different league.
Section 3, the Chicago Sun-Times harsh critique. Stepping onto that massive stage alone brought some intense scrutiny, and the professional reviews were incredibly polarizing.
What's wild is the total pendulum swing we see even within a single review. The Chicago Sun-Times noted that unlike a full Blackpink stage, she initially showed some difficulty commanding the massive space entirely on her own. Yet by the explosive finale, that same publication admitted she completely owned it and proved exactly why she was chosen as the headliner. So where did that initial disconnect happen?
Well, the critics backed up their harsh takes with some very specific technical gripes. They argued that the pyrotechnics at the very beginning felt like a symbolic lack of initial heat. Plus, they felt the massive stage design and the huge number of backup dancers actually swallowed her presence early on rather than elevating it. Add to that reports of imbalanced audio mixing that left some of her live vocals sounding flat, and you've basically got a recipe for a rocky start in the eyes of the press. Honestly, the most visceral critique from the Sun-Times happened during her track Dracula, which is a collab with Kevin Parker of Tame Impala. Reviewers felt her live vocals and the recorded backing track just clashed awkwardly. That led to the stinging quote we mentioned earlier, that the whole thing felt like a lavishly packaged karaoke performance. Ouch, right? That's a pretty brutal assessment of the audio engineering for a stage of that size. Section 4. Setlist focused on unreleased songs. So, the crucial piece of the puzzle is understanding why the general crowd's energy might have dipped, which leads us straight to her setlist choices. To fill out that marathon 60-minute set, Jennie took a massive, calculated risk. She pocked the middle of her set with unfamiliar, unreleased songs from her upcoming solo projects. So, aside from her recent release Less Than a Lover, she was debuting completely new tracks out of nowhere, like Sweet Tooth, Fallen Angel, Lock It Down, and Heaven. Now, if you were a diehard fan in the front rows, you were probably absolutely ecstatic to hear new music. But the media reported a totally different vibe further back. For the general festival audience, people who might know her big hits but aren't deep in the fandom, the immersion just dropped. If you can't sing along or dance to a song you've literally never heard, it's really hard to stay engaged in a massive outdoor field. Some outlets even reported attendees leaving early during this mid-show lull. Section 5, Explosive Finale and Fan Praise. But hey, the story definitely doesn't end there. Let's look at the end of the show and this explosive redemption arc.
Because when it was time to close out the show, even her harshest critics had to admit she completely nailed it. The closing trio of songs, Mantra, Extrel, and culminating in her namesake track, Like Jennie, was widely described as a masterclass in charisma, rap performance, and just flawless synchronized choreography. This was the exact moment she fully harnessed the energy of that live band and the massive crowd. And as a stark counter to the media complaining about the pacing, her fans fiercely defended her energy. From the muddy, rain-soaked trenches of Grant Park, attendees flooded the internet with glowing reviews. For them, her undeniable stage presence and the sheer spectacle of it all completely overshadowed any early technical hiccups. Plus, fans brought up a super interesting point about those audio critiques. Tons of attendees claimed that the live in-person vocal mix ringing through the park was actually super clear and powerful, like way better than what was being broadcast on the official Lollapalooza live stream. This directly challenges those negative reviews, right? It suggests that some of the flat audio complaints might have just been an issue with the broadcast mix rather than her actual live singing.
And, the global press wasn't universally negative either. Outlets like Rolling Stone Philippines actually praised her artistic growth. They noted that the performance brilliantly showcased an expanded musical spectrum, perfectly bridging the gap between her iconic Blackpink era and her emerging identity with her solo album Ruby. They pointed out she's becoming highly adept at commanding major festival stages strictly under her own name, just 2 syllables, no safety net.
Section 6. Solo artist Jennie's next step. This polarizing crucible of a performance ultimately proves she's forging a bold new path. After testing both her physical stamina and an entire unreleased musical catalog in front of a staggering 400,000 festival goers, she's not slowing down. She immediately sets her sights on Japan's Summer Sonic Festival just 2 weeks later on August 14th. The Lollapalooza stage was essentially one massive high-stakes testing ground. Which brings us to the core of why this all matters. We want to leave you with this final thought from our explainer. Considering the fierce debate, the technical hurdles, and the undeniable triumphs of her historic Chicago debut, how will she evolve her performance? Armed with all this feedback from Lolla, how is Jennie going to adapt her setlist and staging for her next massive global audience? It's a fascinating journey for a solo artist, and we seriously can't wait to see what she does next. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.